Welcome to the Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Hey, welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. This is the podcast for artist makers and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do so over my website, which is mikebrennan.me. And let me just tell you, I have a host of resources there for you as a creator because I want to see you win. I want to see you step more fully into your creativity so that you can start seeing those things realized in your life. You can write that book. You can do that painting series. You can start that creative business. Whatever it is that you've been wanting to do, dragging your feet on, maybe you're not even fully aware what this needs to look like just yet. But the first part is showing up and engaging, is choosing yourself, choosing your creativity, prioritizing for it. And if you're struggling with that, I have created a bunch of resources like the Daily Creative Habit 90-Day Journal, where you can set intention and take action steps. And I also have some other free resources like the Daily Creative Habit Facebook group. And there are all sorts of things that can be found on my website, mikebrennan.me. So go there and enjoy the resources, take advantage of the things that I have created just for you. Now, today I want to talk about why you as a creator, as an artist, as a maker, you should be creating daily, not weekly, not quarterly, not even monthly, daily. And I know you may be thinking, I don't have the time. I don't know where I would fit that into my already busy schedule. Well, let me just tell you that from my experience, when you can establish this rhythm of showing up every day and creating something, you will start to yield things in your life. You'll start to rediscover joy. You'll start to tap into clarity. And if something like a style and a voice has been something that's eluded you for a while, this is the key, because when you create daily, basically what you're doing is you're showing up and doing the work. And there's no shortcut around that. So I want to talk quickly today about 4 reasons why you should be creating daily. This has been my experience for the past almost 13 years of showing up every day, creating something. Sometimes those things are small. Sometimes those things are bigger. It depends on my ability to have the time that day to go longer, energy. It depends on ideas. It depends sometimes on resources that I have. While all those things fluctuate, the part that doesn't is me choosing myself, is me showing up and creating. And I went from doing absolutely nothing for 10 years to, okay, what would it look like if I showed up today and created something and just had a place to explore, to play? And then as that grew, as I started to engage with that part of myself, I saw I can do this, first off. And second of all, it doesn't have to be as big and scary as I thought it would be. I don't need big blocks of time like I thought I did. I don't need big budgets and expensive materials. What I need is actually to prioritize this for me, to show up, to block out this time, and to engage with my creativity, to create something today. And then tomorrow, show up and do it again, and rinse and repeat. And one of the things that this journey has taught me has been there's no way around this. Again, there's no shortcut. It's simply showing up and doing the work. And as you do the work, results happen. Things change. You evolve. You do work. You do a lot of bad work that you have to get through to do the good work. And then sometimes you step back into doing some bad work because you're trying some new things. All part of this process. So with these 4 reasons why you should be creating daily, the first one is creativity is a muscle. I mean, think about if you didn't get out of bed for several days, maybe an entire week, and then you tried to step out of bed and perhaps lift something or do something a little more strenuous with your muscles, you would feel it. It would be difficult because you haven't done it in a while. You haven't used those muscles regularly. And so it's the same thing with creativity. I don't know why we think we can go long stretches without engaging with this muscle and then sit down and we want to do something amazing. And meanwhile, we end up frustrated because it doesn't look like what we envision in our heads, or we spend all the time that we thought we were going to create just setting up our materials and getting in the right headspace and thinking up the ideas without actually executing anything. It can be a very frustrating process for us when we're doing this in fits and spurts. And part of that is because we're not exercising the muscle of creativity. And when you exercise the muscle of creativity, it's doing something. It's making you more fit, if you will, creatively, because you're learning to not just wait for inspiration, but you're learning to show up and you're learning to execute on ideas quicker. You're learning that you can have incredible growth in this process because the more you show up, the more that you do. I mean, I know that sounds like a no-brainer, right? It's true. And if you don't do things except maybe once a week, once a month, once a quarter, think about the amount of time that's between those visits with your creativity. Think about how you haven't engaged with that part of you, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, how do I do this again? Or it just doesn't feel as natural. It doesn't feel like you can jump in as quickly. It takes a lot longer to develop skill. It takes a lot longer to develop ideas. It takes a lot longer to see results and see progress. And when we don't see those things, it can be highly discouraging because then we feel like nothing is really happening, or we can discredit our creativity. When in fact, it doesn't actually have anything to do with our skill set or skill level or ideas. It just is that we haven't showed up enough to be nimble, to be fit creatively. So it's flexing those muscles creatively on a regular basis, engaging with that so that we can get into the process quicker. So we're not fumbling around, so that we're not simply looking for moments when we're being inspired to lead us into creativity, as opposed to deciding in advance, I'm going to be creative regardless if I feel inspired or not, regardless if I have an idea or not, regardless of if my skill set is matching what my vision is. The way these things develop is by doing the work. And I'm deciding in advance that I'm going to do the work and I'm going to set myself up for success. So that's the first thing, is remembering that creativity is a muscle. It needs to be worked out. And I say worked out on a daily basis. After all, I know I do talk about daily creative habit. That's my thing. But I do that for a reason. It's not simply just a branding thing. It's not simply to just encourage people to do something that I've experienced myself. But it's because I really truly believe this. It's because I've lived it. It's because I continue to live it and have seen the results and seen the change, the transformation in me. That's why I encourage other people to do this. Number 2, creation. Daily creation reduces fear and resistance. The more time that goes between when you create something, the less you create, the more precious that thing gets to you, the more precious your materials get. Like, you don't want to ruin that new canvas that you got because you spent a lot of money on it and it's staring at you now, and you're thinking, it's going to take me a long time to complete this painting, and several hours, maybe a week or maybe a day, whatever that looks like. And you're in this, it's very precious mentality. And what happens is we start to baby things and we start to fear. And the problem is, when you're creating like sporadically with this and the materials are maybe more expensive, we get this kind of high stakes feel to what we're doing. Like, I better not mess this up. I better not do something that is less than perfect, because then it's going to wreck this. It's going to be a failure. It's going to ruin something. And so it mounts this pressure inside of us, and we can fear messing things up. We can fear not being perfect. And we all know we can't be perfect. No project that we do is going to be perfect. And we can have that sense of resistance, then build this imposter syndrome inside of us and this self-doubt. And these voices get louder and louder. And we're not engaging with our creativity because fear is sitting on us and it feels so heavy. And so the more that you can show up and create quickly, the more you'll be able to move through this and not suffer from things being too precious. I can just tell you, I remember sitting with my sketchbook and drawing something and thinking to myself, oh man, this is terrible. Like, this is not a good day for me today. There was something comforting about the fact that I knew I was doing something daily, so I could close the book on something that I felt less than great about and have the confidence to know tomorrow is a new day and I get to take a new chance on something. I get to create something new tomorrow. And maybe I didn't feel good about it today, but maybe tomorrow I'll feel better about it. Maybe today, even though what I created was a mess, perhaps there was something that I learned in the process of making that I'm going to carry over into what I do tomorrow. So nothing is ever really wasted. And the more work that you're doing and knowing that when today comes to a close, I can close this project, if you will, and move on to whatever is new tomorrow. It reduces the fear. It reduces the resistance because you normalize showing up. You normalize doing the work, which makes it easier, so much easier to push through what we feel like are sometimes creative blocks. Push through that mentality that things need to be perfect. Push through not wanting to mess up our materials or resources, because the more that you do, the quicker you'll engage, the more you'll complete something, so to speak, and then move on to something else. Now, I realize that there are projects that need longer amounts of time. There are projects that need to breathe and need lots and lots and lots of hours for you to pour into. I'm not saying that that stuff is not valid nor necessary, because I believe that it is. I do believe there is value in staying with something and working on it over a long period of time and continuing to let this evolve and adding to it and engaging with it. But the problem comes on that front when I see people only doing that and they're not doing anything else that are quicker wins, so to speak. They're not moving through things at a faster rate. And so what happens is these things become precious. Someone who's writing a book and they're writing this book for the past 5-10 years, there's so much pressure around this book for them to actually release it, to say it's done. There's a sense of maybe, well, then what do I do? I've spent so much time on this. I've spent years of my life creating this thing. The fear of what happens after I release this. What happens after I release it and maybe it doesn't connect with anybody? It's a quote flop or failure. What then? To know that I've spent all this time, energy, effort, resources, etc. on this one project and then it didn't do what I had hoped it would do, that can be terrifying. And that could be creatively debilitating. And we don't want to do anything else because we think it's not worth it. It's not worth the pain of creating something and maybe being misunderstood, or creating something and it not being received. And so I see a lot of people in that camp where they're pouring lots and lots of hours into one thing and it becomes this big, quote, masterpiece of a thing. And then it becomes so weighty, so heavy because there's so much expectation around this particular thing. It's far better if you have something like that, to have smaller projects along the way that you can jump in and out of. Maybe it's doing, if you're the painter in this scenario, maybe it's doing quick little studies, quick drawings. It's keeping yourself nimble enough to do some things, to complete some things, so that you experience those quick wins. You experience that that sense of working out those muscles, like I said, from point number one of creativity being a muscle. So the more that we get into daily creation, the more it reduces the fear and resistance, which is number two. Number three, when we engage with our creativity daily, it opens doors that you can't see yet. Now, what do I mean by that? You don't always know what opportunities are going to come from your creative work. And the more creative work that you do, the more creative work that you put out there, the more people can see, the more people know what you're doing. It makes sense, right? Because when I was creating things and things that like I said, I wasn't even really proud of some of these things. I was kind of embarrassed by some of these things. But the journey I was on was I'm creating something every day. And part of that, the accountability part, if you will, was I was going to share it on social media, put it out in public, let people know what I was doing on this journey, because I knew it was more than just about this specific project. It was about this journey. And I wanted people to know that I was showing up, that I was engaging, that I was working things out in public a little bit sometimes, which was messy and kind of vulnerable. But I still decided to do it. And the reason is because it let people see that I was actively working. If you're not engaging with your creativity daily, you have less things to show for what you're doing creatively because you're doing less things creatively. You have less things to talk about on social media. It always amazes me when people say, I don't know what to share on social media. I don't know what to share maybe in emails to my email list. I don't know what to share as far as content. If you do more things, you'll have more things to talk about. You'll have more things to share. You'll be sharing work in progress. You'll be sharing breakthroughs that you had along the way, not just simply here's the final product and end result, if you will. Here's the masterpiece. It's finally done. We're sharing things all along the way. And so when you show up and engage with your creativity every day, you're opening doors that you can't see yet because you're putting yourself out there as you're doing this work and people are seeing it. And perhaps they see something that makes a connection and they invite you into an opportunity. I had this happen several times over the years where I would do something. Maybe it was a pop culture themed piece of work and I put it out there and someone noticed. That's how I got one of my pieces on The Talking Dead with Chris Hardwick, which was, a kind of talk show based around the Walking Dead series several years ago. And so that piece ended up on television, which was an amazing opportunity. I also had the opportunity to have some things featured pop culture wise on sci-fi.com. And they ran a feature on me and the work that I did that was pop culture related as far as superheroes and more of the sci-fi type stuff. The reason why they knew that they could ask me and invite me into that opportunity is because they saw me doing that work. I was putting it out there. I was sharing that. So the creativity opens doors that you can't see yet because you don't know who's looking. You don't know who's seeing your work. You don't know who's engaging with your work once you put it out there. But the point is, you have to show up to do the work to be able to put it out there. And so daily creation, it leads to these connections. It leads to these opportunities. It leads you to projects that you haven't even planned for, perhaps things you haven't even dreamed about asking for. And they could come as a result of you doing the work and people seeing you and knowing that you're doing the work. So that was number 3. Quick recap. Number 1, creativity is a muscle. Flex it daily. Number 2, daily creation reduces fear and resistance. And the more that we do, the quicker we'll be able to move through things. Number 3, daily creation opens doors that you can't even see yet. Show up, do the work, share the work, let people see and invite you into things. Opportunities are there. And lastly, daily creation is important because your work is your legacy. As a creator, it's your work. At the end of your life, what do you want to be in the rearview mirror? What is the legacy you're going to leave with your creative work? And if you only show up every so often, you're going to have a lot less to inform people about who you are, who you were, what's important to you, what your work centered around. Think about the people whose work that you really resonate with. People that maybe their work is in museums, or maybe there's a certain musician who's no longer alive and they left behind them a legacy of these tremendous albums that still inspire you to this day. They've become the soundtrack for your life. Think about if they had not shown up to do the work, to create, to make these songs, to record these songs, to leave them for other people to share the work. That's what's hanging in the balance for us. And we don't see that often when we're in the middle of it. We just think, I have all these other responsibilities and it's hard for me to find the time and I don't have the resources and I don't feel good enough. I don't feel inspired and I'm not educated enough, or I'm too old, I'm too young. Like whatever the stories that we've been telling ourselves, the ones that are keeping us from doing the work is also keeping us from work that leaves behind a legacy. And think about how someone else may be impacted by the work that you do. Perhaps you've had some people say some things to you. You've been fortunate enough to create some things, and someone to say, I so appreciate that you created this thing because it inspires me, because I want to hang this painting in my home. So every time I look at it, I remember to embrace joy, to breathe for a moment in my day and just look at this painting and maybe go somewhere else for a little bit, to go, oh yeah, like that beautiful scene on the beach or that cabin in the woods that my family used to go to. This painting reminds me of that, and it helps me keep those memories alive. Or if it's a song, it's inspiring somebody, it's giving words and voice, or maybe you've written something that describes something for someone who doesn't have the words to use for their own experiences. And you write something, you create something that lets them feel seen and heard. That's an amazing gift. Why would we not want to leverage as much time for that as possible? Perhaps because we don't truly believe in ourselves and our work enough. That can happen for other people. That can happen for the people who've inspired us, but that couldn't really happen for us to leave that kind of work for someone else. But the truth is, it can, but it won't unless we show up and do the work. So showing up and doing the work is the entry. It's getting in, and then it's doing better and better work, and it's doing work that's more aligned. It's figuring out who you are in the midst of your work and your process, not just simply about what you end up holding in your hands or you end up as a end result of your creative efforts. It's also about who you're becoming and who you have become. It's about your progress. It's about your voice. It's about the way you see things, the way you show up in the world. All of that stuff goes into your creative work. And so for us to have work that leaves behind a legacy, we need to be doing more work, because that stuff takes time. It's a process. I know it's hard. Trust me, there are still days where even as a professional creative, there are projects that I have that are sitting in the back of my mind saying, oh man, I really got to get around to doing that. I really have to move that to the front burner, if you will, on the stove, right? Because I know that if I actually took the time to create that thing, that might have more impact than something else I'm doing today, even if it's a creative thing. It's prioritizing. It's understanding your place in this and understanding why daily creating has power and gives you the ability to cut to the front of the line, because a lot of other people are not doing this. And so if you're struggling with your own creative endeavors, your own creative self, you're trying to figure out your voice, your style, you're trying to work throughout, you're trying to work out things in your art. You're trying to make things significant and purposeful with intention. You want to have impact with your work. The way to do that is by showing up and doing the work. It's continually engaging with this process, even if it means wrestling, because it's good and it's necessary and it's part of the process. We can't simply always just have an idea, download it to something, and then say, here it is. It's perfect. It's the masterpiece. That's lightning in a bottle a lot of times. And the times when that has happened, the stories that I've heard around those things, it's usually because those people have already been in a place where they're showing up and engaging with themselves and they're doing work. And that just happens to be their next project. I realize that a lot of this, for me, comes out of my graphic design background. Because in design, we had shorter deadlines for things. We had, here's the creative brief. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. Spend some time thinking conceptually, thinking about what the ideas are, and then spend some more time executing those ideas, coming up with certain concepts, having time for revision, having time to come to, here's the thing that we're actually shipping out the door. Here's the thing that's the final product. Here's the thing that's going to be published or printed or launched. And that, depending on the project, could be a really rapid timeline, or it could be a little bit more lengthy. But the point was, it taught me to think in terms of projects. And it wasn't until a little ways, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but it wasn't until a little ways into my own projects that weren't design related, but they were still creative projects, that I realized I work best when I give myself projects. And when I give myself projects, it doesn't feel like this open-ended, I'm creating things, but I'm not really sure where this is going. It just is this kind of nebulous, flowing sense of, I'm showing up, I'm making something because I'm enjoying the process of creating something, or maybe there's a certain outcome I want, and I'm kind of making sure that I'm aimed towards that. Giving myself projects helped me, especially early on when I was going, okay, I'm doing this daily creative habit coming out of doing nothing for 10 years. Can I even do this? So what did I do? I broke things down into small projects. I said, can I do 7 days of, so I would do flower drawings and watercolor paintings and things. It was enough for me to have a very pointed, specific project, but also gave me the ability within that. I could try watercolor, I could try charcoal, I could try colored pencils, I could try different things. It was still within the same container of flowers. It was 7 days, so it was short enough for me to think, if I don't like this, it's not resonating with me, I can then change the channel after 7 days. And if I do like it, I can extend that 7 days, or maybe another 7 days. And so I started just playing around with, what would 7 days of flowers look like? What would 30 days of pets look like? What would 90 days of faces look like? Gave myself all these different projects to keep me engaged, to keep me going, to keep stoking that sense of curiosity and saying, what could this look like? Where could I dive in deeper and not simply show up to create, that's this nebulous thing, but have some specific goalposts and mile markers along the way that help me choose my creativity so that I'm working out creatively, so that I can do the work, so that I can transform as I'm doing the work and evolve and go, oh, this is what I really love. Oh, this is the project I really want to do. Oh, this is the thing that I really want to bring to the world. Make these things with my hands, shape these things with the way that I see things and experience things. Understand myself as a creator and what motivates me. All that stuff, the creative journey, comes out of showing up, choosing your creativity, I believe, daily. So that's my challenge to you. What would that look like for you today? What would it look like for you to show up every single day and create something? And you've heard me, if you've heard me before, you've heard me talk about start small, 15, 20 minutes a day. That's how I got a hold of things. It gave me an entry point, and I could always add to that if I had more time available for that day. It's a dance. It flows, but you have to show up for it. You have to choose it. You have to want it. You have to be hungry for it. You have to recognize that there is something of value here that's not just for you, but that's actually for the world. Because when you create, you come alive. When you create, you have ideas. When you create, your voice and your style get honed. When you create, you come alive. And so does the world around you. So I always leave these challenges whenever I'm doing these solo episodes of go create something. And that, my friend, is the charge. Go create something today and something else tomorrow, and then something else again the next day. Keep going. The 4 reasons, one more time, of why you need to be creating daily is: number 1, creativity is a muscle. Number 2, daily creation reduces fear and resistance. Number 3, daily creativity opens doors that you can't even see yet. And finally, number 4, daily creativity leaves behind a legacy. That's what you're doing. You're leaving behind a legacy with the work that you do, showing who you are, how you're showing up in the world, what's important to you. It's a gift for yourself and for others. So today, go create something. Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.